I recently played through a game called Jusant, and it's got me thinking about movement. No matter how far back into the medium you dig, movement persists as one of the most important factors of a video game, from platformers to shooters. The momentum and motion of the player character often separates the good from the great, so it seemed appropriate to focus this video on the mechanics of movement. I want to highlight a few games that use movement in a compelling or unique way to enhance its overall experience. Let's begin with the very game that birthed this idea. Developed by Don't Nod, the studio best known for the Life is Strange series, Jusant presents the player with a deceptively simple ambition: climb to the top of a gargantuan tower. There's no combat, no NPCs, no side quests, just you and the drive to climb. Even the narrative quickly drifts to the background after establishing the world around you as some kind of water-starved planet. You don't even know exactly why the unnamed protagonist wants to reach the peak of this behemoth of a structure. As you ascend, you can read a number of optional documents that contextualize the space around you, but barring a few brief cutscenes, there's nothing to distract you from the game's mechanical predicate. Devoid of superficial embellishments, Jusant is inherently simple, but that doesn't make it shallow. Climbing isn't simply getting from point A to B like the traversal you see in games such as Uncharted or modern Tomb Raider. Jusant presents you with dozens and dozens of bite-sized sections of upward traversal that require a little more contemplation. The player character is equipped with a rope that he can attach to the surface of the tower before beginning his climb. From there, you have to navigate onward until you're able to reach more solid ground, at which point you can recall your rope and explore until you find the next opportunity to climb. Expectedly, these sections start out simplistically, but grow in complexity as you begin to master the basics. Your rope ensures that you can never actually fall off the mountain, and even if you forget to attach it, the game will do it for you. However, that doesn't mean you're guaranteed to progress once you leave the ground. Our friend here is burdened by a stamina meter that depletes as you climb, and if you perform a jump to cover more ground, something Jusant regularly requires, your maximum stamina is lowered until you're able to plant your feet back on the ground. You can rest while climbing to refill the meter, but this system ultimately ensures that reckless climbing will prevent you from making progress later in the game. Your rope also contains only so much slack, and while you can place additional pitons mid-climb to act as checkpoints of sorts, it may become necessary to restart from square one if you don't execute your ascent wisely. Another element that separates Jusant from many of its contemporaries is the manner in which the climbing is actually controlled. Each of the protagonist's hands is mapped to the left and right triggers. To begin climbing, you need to hold down either trigger so the character will grab the nearest hold. Once you're secured on the wall, you can use the analog stick to guide your free hand to another hold. Once you find that, you can use the original hand to move even higher, and, well, I think you get how climbing works. The key to this control scheme, though, is that you always have to hold down at least one of the triggers. If you ever let go of both at the same time, you're going to fall, either to your highest piton or back down to the ground. Whereas other games stick the player character to the wall, Jusant forces you to always actively contribute to the climb. This makes upward ascension feel much more involved, almost like a dance. As you become more comfortable, you'll be amazed by how quickly you're able to scramble up surfaces, and since there's no penalty for falling other than a little wasted time, you're free to experiment with speedruns or risky jumps. The marriage of a thoughtful control scheme and engaging mechanical decisions keeps Jusant engaging for all of its 4 to 6 hour runtime. Its movement feels deliberate, grounding you in the experience. This is further bolstered by the sense of scale on display, with previously surmounted structures often visible from above. The game requires consistent focus, but mitigates the risk of failure, which largely eliminates frustration. This results in a sort of meditative state as you play, which I'd imagine is exactly what Don't Nod was aiming to achieve. It could have been much more action-oriented, which honestly would have been really fun too. In fact, let's switch gears. If you're interested in some high-octane action, you needn't look any further than Insomniac's Spider-Man series. Over the course of 3 games thus far, we're looking here at Miles Morales, the developer has managed to embody what it means to don that legendary suit better than anyone else. The games contain a ton of mechanics ripe for discussion, but for the sake of this conversation, we're going to focus on the web slinging. Shooting webs is one of the most iconic elements of Spider-Man, so it's to be expected that it'll be incorporated into any game that invokes his name. Insomniac's take on the webbed wonder heeds this creed in both combat and puzzle solving, but it's how traversal functions that's relevant for the sake of this video. As is the case in virtually all Spider-Man media, Peter or Miles can attach webs to the buildings around them to swing forward through the city. This process is very simple, as your webs will automatically attach to the closest surface, meaning that as long as you're relatively close to some kind of structure, you don't need to worry about losing momentum. Analogously to Jusant, the triggers are responsible for shooting out of your left and right hands. This similar control scheme facilitates the same meditative trance that can be achieved once you get the hang of things. The fluidity does grow more complex, however, if you're interested in digging a little deeper. For example, Spider-Man will automatically scale the side of a building provided you've got enough momentum, meaning that a structure standing in your way doesn't have to interrupt your flow. You can also unlock the ability to shoot a web forward in mid-air. Instead of attaching to a surface, it provides a boost of forward momentum, enabling maintenance of speed if you're in a more open space. Mastering these mechanics will afford you a huge sense of freedom as you explore the city. What's really important to note here is that the Insomniac Spider-Man games are open world. Now, there are a few common associations with open world games, one of the biggest being fast travel, an ability used to jump to another point on the map to avoid wasting time covering large stretches of land that you've already explored. Spider-Man features a fast travel system just as its contemporaries do, but I'd be willing to bet that some of you who've played the games have never even used it. I never did. Why? Because Insomniac makes movement so engaging. As you begin to master traversal, it becomes harder to pull yourself away, less desirable to stop the momentum. I mean, think about it. Why on earth would you ever ride the subway when you can swing along the skyline? Imagine if your only option in Spider-Man was to run everywhere. I mean, I guess you could do it if you wanted to. Insomniac allows you to land on the ground and even mingle with pedestrians, but running doesn't provide any satisfaction. There's no mechanical depth, it's just an obligation. Once you get back into the air, everything changes. Getting from point A to B is no longer a means to an end, it's part of the fun. Through engaging movement, Insomniac manages to turn its open world into an open playground.
Heck yeah, these are awesome! Thanks, Spider-Man!
If you're a longtime viewer of the channel, you've likely already heard me talk about Stray, but man, I can't stop thinking about this game. I've sung its praises enough, so we won't dwell for too long, but I want to dig just a bit deeper. From the initial trailer, it was clear that Blue 12 Studio was placing the utmost priority on making the player feel like a cat. The game certainly looks the part, but nailing that feline feeling is another matter entirely. If you've played the game, you know that the devs managed to pull it off, but it's worth examining how moving as a cat recontextualizes the environments that you explore. Most video games place you in the shoes of a human, or at the very least, some kind of bipedal human simulacrum. There are innumerable exceptions, of course, but Stray affords the relatively rare opportunity to play as a different creature with which humans are familiar. We know how cats move, but to execute those movements is incredibly novel. A cat possesses much more grace than the average human, enabling you to, say, balance with ease on a plank of wood. A human, on the other hand, would likely need to slowly scoot across, arms outstretched, assuming the makeshift bridge could even support the individual's weight. The cat isn't bogged down by such complications thanks to its smaller size, but this statural discrepancy can also serve as a complication. Since you're so small, you can't just enter a door, for example. You may need to find a smaller hidden entryway, or even find a way to enter the building from above. Thanks to the natural agility of a cat, you can access everything you need, but the manner in which you do it may require creativity. Such demands encourage thoughtfulness. As you explore, your mind focuses not just on the beauty and wonder of what you see, but how these surroundings can be traversed. What would a cat do? The great distinction between video games and any other art form is the capacity for interaction. We're not just spectators of these worlds, we're participants in them. The manners in which movement is implemented can fundamentally change our relationship with the space around us. A game may seek to ground us in its world, or change how we traverse its world, or simply alter how we perceive its world. Of course, there are countless other mechanics that influence how a game plays, and the way in which momentum impacts platformers specifically warrants an entire video of its own, but those are discussions for another time. In the here and now, I just wanted to scratch the surface of how movement can change the game.